So, since we didn't really get to spend as much time talking about it as I think we really should have, uh, because we sacrificed talking about the syllabus for making introductions, which I think is just as important. Um, but I wanted to make this little video going over the syllabus, drawing your attention to certain aspects of it, and commenting on certain parts of the syllabus for the purposes of clarity and just to highlight, the most important bits, as it were. All right, so here it is. Of course, this is my email. Again, if you have not yet emailed me at this email address, joshuacwright23@gmail.com, you should absolutely do so ASAP. It's really important that I know. It's really important that I have an email that I know that you check frequently, and that I know that those lines of communication are open. And it's also important for you to know that my virtual office hour is always going to be Monday after class. I put here 5:10 p.m. Just to allow myself a break if need be, a 15-minute break. But normally I'll probably just hang out after class. And I am also available to meet with you via Blackboard Collaborate Ultra by appointment. So if you have a class right afterwards, or you have to go to work or something like that, or for whatever reason you can't meet directly after class on Monday, feel free to reach out to me and we can schedule a time to meet that is convenient for both of us. Otherwise, our class time, so our scheduled class time is 3:40 to 4:55 p.m. on Monday and Wednesday. But as we'll elaborate on more in a moment, we'll only actually be meeting during that time slot on Monday. Our synchronous sessions will be on Monday, whereas Wednesdays will be asynchronous. But again, more clarification on that in just a moment. Again, there are two main components of English 1012 at Brooklyn College. And those two main components are the writing of a research paper and the introduction to literature. So in English 1010, you read kind of more expository writing, a lot of nonfiction, probably kind of argumentative essays. A lot of what you read might have bled into what we would call kind of literary artistic writing. But for the most part, it was about conveying sort of just straightforward information, making an argument. Whereas the kind of things we'll be reading now in this class will be sort of veering away from that. It will be more artistic. So fiction and poetry, essentially, right? So we're reading some theoretical pieces early on that sort of make an argument. They're sort of more academic, kind of more expository, but they are connected directly, well, but maybe not directly, but they're connected to the fiction and poetry that we'll be reading, primarily fiction, very little poetry. All right, and then the other component is to write a 7 to 10 page research paper, which we will talk more on in days and weeks to come. You'll basically be writing a research paper that has to do with the themes of the literature that we are reading, right? So as the overarching theme of the class is monsters, start thinking about it in those terms, that the research paper you will be writing will somehow be related to the theme of monsters, and especially how it is embodied in the works that we will be reading, the literary works that we will be reading. You'll have a lot of freedom with it. I don't like to restrain people and give you very confining prompts for a 7 to 10 page research paper, because you'll be working on it over the course of the whole semester. I really want it to be something that you are personally invested in and interested in, and that you won't get bored with after being engaged with it for a matter of really months. So just start thinking about that you'll have to research a topic that is somehow related to the themes, directly or indirectly. But again, we'll talk more about that in days and weeks to come. But just know that it'll pretty much be an option of writing directly about one or more of the texts that are on the syllabus, or writing about a theme that is somehow encapsulated in one or more of the texts. And so all of these primary objectives of the course have to do with those two components. As you can see, develop a research paper, increase literary comprehension, that kind of states the two main components. And then these things are all sort of embedded in that. The thesis, hopefully, in 1010, you did some work in developing theses. And the research paper will, of course, need a thesis. It's an argumentative research paper, so you have to put forward a stance, a perspective, and defend that throughout the research paper with evidence and textual support and counter arguments and so on and so forth. And then practice researching just in general, whether for an argument or not, is one of the skills you want to enhance over the course of the semester. Practice using conventionally correct grammar, punctuation, and spelling. So you want to get to a point where it becomes very easy to use the rules of grammar that are accepted by academic institutions, basically, right? I word it very carefully in that way because it's not to privilege, one kind of speaking over another, say, or one language over another. But, in an academic institution, you'll be using proper English, basically. So that's what you want to be approaching. Standardized rules of grammar, punctuation, and spelling. And then, of course, the practice of editing and revision, which is extremely important, and we'll be working on that. Of course, as I mentioned, if the research paper stretches over the course of almost the whole semester, then you can expect to be doing a fair bit of editing and revising. And then you'll want to, as it's a research paper and you're incorporating sources, you'll need to incorporate those sources using MLA documentation. If there's another citation method that you prefer, like Chicago or something, and you want to use that, talk to me. The most important thing is to be consistent, but you also want to use something that is generally used for writing about literature, as opposed to, say, a kind of citation that is used in the sciences. All right, so for course text, as we talked about in our synchronous session, there's only one course text you need to buy, which is Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls, a very slim volume, a novella. There are e-versions available if you have a Kindle or something like that. I guess you can read it on your computer as well, but you'll have to purchase it, whether it's an e-version or a hard copy. But this only cost me about $13, so it's not expensive, and I think the e-version is probably about the same. For everything else, e-versions will be provided to you. I will provide links or scanned PDF copies in the weekly folders. But if you're someone like me who prefers to have your hard copies instead of an e-version, then I highly encourage you to buy e-copies. So, of course, The Island of Dr. Moreau, you'll have an e-version of that available, but the Signet Classics version is a good hard copy if you want to get that, very inexpensive. We'll be reading a story from Bloodchild. The title story, actually, it's called Bloodchild. It's from a collection by the same name by Octavia Butler, if you want to get that. The Metamorphosis, another very slim volume. If you do get a hard copy, get this one. In other words, the translation by Susan Bernofsky. With an introduction by David Cronenberg. The e-version that I'm providing you with is actually a different translation, which is a little bit wonky, but we won't be doing like a super close reading of the Metamorphosis where we tear it apart sentence by sentence. But in general, it's best if we're all reading the sound translation. So if you do get a hard copy, if that's what you want, then get this one. It's, again, translation by Susan Bernofsky, and it's put out by W.W. Norton. Fairly recent translation. A hard copy of Carmilla. This is actually not a very good copy. I'm going to use it. It's the story. But as it's in the public domain, sometimes people on Amazon sell things that are in the public domain, and it's just a very poorly printed copy. But you can see, if you're familiar with Penguin Classics, they've obviously done up the cover to look like a Penguin Classics book, and that is in fact what I thought I was getting. I got a little bit ripped off with this, but you'll have an e-version of it. If you do get a hard copy of Carmilla, don't get this one. Get one that's good, that's published by a verifiable company. We'll be reading a couple of short stories at the end by Angela Carter, and they're from this book called The Bloody Chamber. So if you want to get those short stories, they are in Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber. And then we'll be reading one short story by Stephen King, which is from the collection Nightmares and Dreamscapes. So there are other hard copies of books you can get if you want them, but those are the hard copies I have. There's some things I just have the e-version, like H.P. Lovecraft, The Call of Cthulhu. I don't have a hard copy of that, but I'll probably get one. Some of the poems I don't have hard copies of, and the Poe story I actually don't have a hard copy of. But those things are easy to find. Like Poe, you can get. We're reading one short story by Poe coming up soon, and you can easily any complete works of Poe you can find that in. It's all easy to find, but I will provide you links with everything except for this is Caliban. You have a couple of months to get this. We're not reading this until April, but the sooner the better. Get it and be prepared. Okay, and then I also recommend that you get these books just as a reference. A Writer's Reference by Diane Hacker and Nancy Summers is very helpful in writing long-form essays and doing research. Elements of Style by William Strunk and E.B. White. A lot of you might have used this before in high school or in 1010. You might have a copy already, and it's just a helpful reference. I have my copy of this, and I go back to it time and time again just to check things and verify things on a grammatical level. That's really what this is for grammar, and it's just a helpful. Even if you feel really confident in your grammar, as I generally do myself, it's still useful sometimes just to check certain things. And then a good college level dictionary and thesaurus. Some of the things we're reading, especially early on, might have a lot of complicated vocabulary words. So a dictionary will be of great use to you, and a thesaurus will be of use to you in writing, especially if you want to find different words to say the same thing. Of course, you can find plenty of online versions of these things. Merriam-Webster online dictionary is one that I use almost every day, so that's a perfectly good one. And you also have, via the Brooklyn College Library, you have access to the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, which is really good if you want to get the etymology, the story, the background, the history of a word. So you have access to that. So this isn't something that you should necessarily go out and spend a fortune on. If you're somebody like me that likes to have a hard copy of things around, then you might want to go buy a cheap dictionary. But don't spend a lot of money on this. There's so many resources online, and it's not something that you get lost in reading by a window on a stormy winter's day, such as this. Right, so a hard copy isn't of primary importance, but you want to make sure. I'm also putting that on there to indicate the importance of accessing these resources and using them regularly as you read and write. It'll help you both in your comprehension of writing and also writing things that are more clearly comprehensible. Okay, and as stated, this class is half synchronous and half asynchronous. And if a class is asynchronous, as all our Wednesday sessions will be, all of our scheduled Wednesday sessions will be asynchronous, meaning that you'll do the activities outside of a regularly scheduled class time, while making sure to submit all assignments by a respectively designated date and time, usually Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. That's a little bit wrong. Most of the time, the due date will actually probably be Friday by 11:59 p.m. Because the whole point of doing asynchronous sessions is to increase flexibility in the online learning environment. But this will be the suggested due date. Let's put it that way. Like I said, I'll be giving you sort of checklists with suggested schedules in each weekly folder, timeline for each week. And it's always best if you can do everything, the reading that is scheduled for that date, for those Wednesdays, and the discussion boards and anything else. If you can do it by Wednesday, that would be best. Right, because after Wednesday, you'll want to be working on the reading for the coming week, for the coming Monday, right? So obviously this is the first week, so things are a bit different, but really by the weekend, you'll want to be already reading The Uncanny by Freud and the excerpt from Mikhail Bakhtin's Rabelais in His World, and ideally before the weekend, right? It's important to have weekends as much as possible. I know that's very hard when you're in college, but you need breaks and need time to breathe and rest. So anyway, for synchronous sessions, we will meet in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra as we did on Monday on our first class, and unless otherwise notified about any changes in the schedule, Monday classes will always be synchronous, and Mondays will always be synchronous, and Wednesdays will always be asynchronous. The only time that that'll ever change is if something extenuating happens. Let's say that say something happens with my computer or something like that, right? Where we can't have a synchronous session on Monday. That would be the only time that I would ever switch, but I don't really foresee that happening. So expect it to be Mondays will always be synchronous and Wednesdays will always be asynchronous. And the schedules are always going to be laid out in the weekly folders, which you can find on the navigation panel on the left side of our screen on our Blackboard homepage. So over here, you'll always find the weekly folders. So I'm making this video around midnight on Tuesday going into Wednesday. But by Wednesday at midnight, I will have a weekly folder for next week already. But the weekly folder won't be complete. What will be in the weekly folder by Wednesday tonight, basically within the next 24 hours, what will be in the weekly folder is the readings, possibly the quiz, a few supplementary materials, but it won't be everything. So keep that in mind. It'll have the things you need to prepare for next week, but it won't necessarily have everything that you need to do for next week. And it'll probably be like that pretty much throughout the semester, where I'll set up the weekly folders around Wednesday with the reading and quizzes, possibly discussion boards. But it won't necessarily have everything that you need to do for the scheduled week really until that week. It'll have, but it will definitely, I can promise you that it will have everything you need to prepare for the coming week to do those other things. And I'm going to work on, over the next few days, getting all the readings into the readings file here, which is separate from the weekly folder. So the weekly folder will, with the exception of Mrs. Caliban, which you'll have to get a hard copy for, the weekly folders will always have links to the readings. But as some of you might want to get started early on certain readings, we have some longer readings that some of you might want to get a head start on. And so I'm going to work on putting everything into the readings section here, which is separate from the weekly folders. And I'm also going to work on getting set up another tab for course materials, which are going to be extracted from the weekly folders. And that'll be things like video lectures that I'm going to make. I'll be making one soon on key terms that have to do with these early readings, like uncanny, grotesque, and objection. I'll be making a video about that. That'll be in here. Some supplementary materials, some recommended reading. But that's not here yet. I don't have that supplementary course materials yet, or just regular course materials. But I will work on getting that in there. And that'll be available for easier access, perhaps, for some things that you might want to look at throughout the semester as well. All right, and then I've sort of broadly divided the class up into 5 sections. Introduction to each other, introduction to research, and introduction to thematic literary foundations, which is where we find ourselves now, right? So we sort of made some introductions to each other on Monday, and you're sort of still doing that as you do your discussion boards with the peer responses on the discussion boards, the introductory discussion board. I will also be responding to each and every one of you on the introduction discussion board. And then we're going to talk about, we'll do some introduction to the research, what it means to write a research paper of this kind. And these early readings, these sort of complicated, difficult readings, are sort of laying the thematic, the concepts for the theme of the class, which is monsters. So these early readings are dealing with concepts like the uncanny, the grotesque, abjection, and then Jeffrey Jerome Cohen's 7 theses for monster culture, right? These are laying a conceptual framework through which we will attempt to read the stories and the poems that we have before us. So it's laying this groundwork, these foundations. The second section of the class is asking the right questions, where we start getting into more of the nitty-gritty of doing research, methodology and practices, developing a workable thesis that is the springboard for your research. And then we'll also be talking about applying theory to literature. So the conceptual theory that we are introducing with the essays by Freud, by Julia Kristeva, by Mikhail Bakhtin, and by Jeffrey Jerome Cohen. We'll be looking at how we apply, how those theories introduced in those essays can then be applied to works of literature, like The Island of Dr. Moreau, Mrs. Caliban, Kafka's The Metamorphosis, and so on and so forth. The third part is synthesis, in which you will begin to bring together the results of research, and we'll be looking at how the texts interact with one another within the conceptual framework and beyond. And then we'll be talking about being part of the conversation, structuring argument, and writing an argumentative essay based on research, interrogating text. And what I mean by that, being part of the conversation, is really to stress the importance of that when you are writing a research paper of this sort, when you are putting forth an argument, you're taking part in a conversation that's already happening. So you are interacting with texts, with other voices that are already in existence, right? Your research paper does not exist in a void. And then we'll also be looking at how we can sort of go a bit deeper into the text, push back against the text a little bit, sometimes even perhaps thwart what the author is saying, to challenge what the author is saying, to subvert what the author is saying. But we'll talk more about that when we get there. And then phase 5 is revision and reflection, which will be, obviously, you'll be revising your research paper. Well, the readings will start to drop off. And we'll do some reflection on the process of writing a research paper, reflection on the readings collectively, and the class. All right, so your primary assignments will consist of a research paper, as I said, 7 to 10 pages, and you'll be doing in stages, right? So you'll have a topic proposal, an annotated bibliography, an outline, a first draft, a second draft. The first draft, by the way, will be about half the paper. You won't have to submit the whole paper for the first draft. The second draft will be the first and second half, but without the introduction and conclusion. Adding the introduction and conclusion is another phase. And then you'll have the final draft of all of these components revised into one cohesive whole. We'll talk more about that later. But the key takeaway here is that you'll be doing it in stages, which we'll be talking about stage by stage as we go. So don't get stressed out about that at the moment. Quizzes, as we talked about on Monday, the quizzes are meant to be really easy. You shouldn't think of them as tests exactly, like you don't have to memorize anything. They're just meant to verify that you've done the reading in preparation for our synchronous classes. So you won't have a quiz for every reading. Only the readings that you have to do going into the synchronous classes, the Monday classes. And they will be easy. They'll be mostly multiple choice. There might be an analytical question or two, a question where you have to interpret something in the text that's not immediately obvious on the surface, but your grade won't hinge on how you answer those questions. Your grade will hinge on how you answer the multiple choice questions that says, this happened in the text, that happened in the text, and that, it's very surface level, and you'll have the text at hand to answer those questions, right? So it's essentially open book. But the point is that if you don't do the readings, then it's meant to be kind of difficult for you, but it should be, as long as you do the readings, it should be really easy. And then one of the backbones of the asynchronous sessions is the discussion posts, the discussion board posts. It's meant to be a conversation outside of the synchronous sessions. It'll be all about the readings. They're an essential component. Don't shirk the discussion board posts. It'll quickly diminish your grade, and it basically counts as an absence in addition to the points missed if you don't do it. You'll always have to do every single discussion board post. You'll have to do an initial post. The word counts will vary, but it'll generally be a minimum of 250 words. There will never be a maximum. I want to encourage you to write them as long as you want, and let your thoughts flow. And then you'll always have to do a briefer post to at least one peer's initial post. None of these need to be like fully formed essays. They're responsive, they're reflective, they're engaging with the texts. So I want you to take chances with the discussion board posts. You don't have to write in absolute certainty. And what I'm really looking for with these will be graded lightly. They'll be lightly graded. And most people will most of the grades will be around, you get 2 points as long as you answer your peer response post, as long as you do that sincerely and with respect, you'll get 2 points for that. And then you have 8 more points to get. But most of you, even if it's a decent discussion board post, most of you will probably end up with about 8.5, 9 out of 10 points. I won't give out many 10 out of 10s for the discussion board posts, if any. A 10 out of 10 is really sort of going beyond the demand. I mean, to get a 10 out of 10, it would be something approaching like a fully formed essay. So if you get a 9.5 or a 9 or an 8.5, anything on the discussion board post, anything above an 8 is good, right? An 8 is B and higher. So if you're not getting 10 out of 10s on the discussion board post, don't stress out about that. It's just to maintain a reasonable level of grading. to not inflate the grades. We'll talk more about grading here in a moment, but I can't just give out A's willy-nilly, and if I was giving out A's willy-nilly on the discussion board post, then a lot of people would end up with A's that might not necessarily be deserving of them. But in other words, as long as you're getting at least an 8 regularly on the discussion board posts, then you got nothing to worry about. The only time you'll get less than an 8 on the discussion board posts is if it's just evident to me that you haven't done the reading at all, you've completely misunderstood the reading, if you've plagiarized something, you'll get a 0. That's across the board for anything. Never ever plagiarize. But yeah, I mean, to get less than an 8 has to be, something wildly awry, right? So it's lightly graded. You have that cushion of an 8. Well, if you don't do a pure response, then you automatically lose 2 points as well. Take note that these are only the primary graded assignments for this course. There will be some other things that come along, especially the group work and synchronous assignments. I don't grade the group work exactly. I take note, I make notes, and it goes into final. It goes into the final overall evaluation, how you've performed regularly in groups and on group work. But you'll generally just get a check in Blackboard for those. So I don't assign A's, B's, C's, etc. for the synchronous group work, but I do take evaluative notes throughout the semester, and that goes into that informs your overall grade. And then there might be some additional asynchronous material that you'll have to do. I'll be making like some video lectures that you should watch. I'll try to keep them as brief as possible. And there might be some other assignments, but there's not going to be anything major that's not here. So like the asynchronous work is almost going to be exclusively the discussion board posts. Anything that isn't the discussion board post will be like watching a video, watching a little lecture. There's certain things that might come along, but it's not going to be anything difficult, or there's not going to be any surprises in the road ahead. Nothing major. Participation, attendance, and sincerity of effort. So this is somewhat informed, as I just said, by the group work, which I don't assign grades for exactly, but it informs your performance and your effort and sincerity of effort in the group work, the synchronous work that we do in our synchronous sessions, our in-class sessions. That informs your participation attendance grade. And this helps, right? As participation might take on many forms. In our synchronous sessions, I strongly suggest that you use the audio and video components in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. This will greatly bolster your participation grade. I know that some people are working with hardware that isn't conducive to this. I know that some of you might have siblings or even children of your own in your living situation that make it difficult to do this, to use your audio and video. Or I know there's all kinds of factors, but you should really try, if possible, to use the audio and video. Maybe you can only use one or the other. Maybe you can't use audio and video. Maybe you can only use video. Whatever you can use to show your presence, to really be present, the better. And at the very least, you can engage through the chat function. So if I never see you entering anything into the chat, and I never see you on video, and I never hear your audio, and the only thing that signifies your presence is a gray silhouette on the screen, and when we'll be doing a lot of group work, and as I go around, when we do that, I'll go around from group to group in the little mini rooms. If you'll understand when we do that, if that seems weird to you right now. But if I never see you participating in the chat or anything like that, then it basically counts as an absence for all practical purposes. I need to see participation. So it really requires a special effort in the online classroom to show your presence, right? Because otherwise, for all I know, you just log in and then go watch TV in the other room or something, right? So you need to make a special effort to show your presence, and by whatever means you can. And the place to start is by creating an avatar, right? I said that everyone should create an avatar in Blackboard Basic and Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. So you should have 2 avatars created by now. And I will be making note of who does and who does not create an avatar. That being said, if you use your audio and video in every class session, I really don't care if you have an avatar in the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. So that there's that to take into account as well. So attendance is tallied in part by your evidence presence in our synchronous sessions in Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, as I just outlined. You are allowed 2 excused absences from synchronous sessions. So you can miss 2 of our sort of, so to speak, in-person classes. All of our synchronous sessions will be recorded, and should you miss more than 2 synchronous sessions, I will give you that recording and an alternate assignment per your request, right? So if you missed your 3rd synchronous session, I'm not going to chase you down and say, oh, here's the recording of the class. Here's an alternate assignment. You'll have to come to me, and then I'll give that to you. And you can make it up. But also I expect you to be present. I know that we're in this weird environment and all these different things can happen, but when we do regular school too, in-person school, all kinds of things can happen as well. So those two excused absences from a class that's half synchronous and half asynchronous, I think is pretty generous. As I said above, like with the discussion board, so if you don't do the discussion board for the week, not only do you lose the points for the discussion board, for the missing discussion board, but that also counts as an absence, right? So your presence for the asynchronous the asynchronous sessions is basically validated by the submission of the work, right? So which will mainly be the discussion boards, which have to do with the readings. And some other things. And bear in mind also that like when I put lectures up, video lectures, I can see who's watching them and who's not. So bear that in mind as well. You'll never be quizzed on video lectures or anything like that, but I can see who's participating actively and who isn't. As I said, in short, be present in every way possible. Not only will you reap richer rewards from the class, but the class itself will in turn be especially enriched by unique contributions that only you can make. And I mean that absolutely sincerely. This class is nothing without all of you. Otherwise, it's just me talking into a void. It's really about what you bring to it. This class is only, any class is only about what the students bring to it, the efforts they make, and the contributions that you make. Submission guidelines, unless otherwise notified, submit all assignments through Blackboard. You will receive a written set of instructions and a video tutorial on how to do this. And you will generally be able to submit via links in the weekly folders. So that what I'm referring to there is that video. Again, as I said, I made it last semester, so some of the minute details might differ, but the general process is the same. So that Blackboard tutorial that I included in the first weekly folder, that tells you how to submit assignments if you don't know how to do that. Submit all papers and drafts as .doc, .docx, or .pdf files only. This is, I consider this a favor to me. Please don't submit any other kind of file. I have to involve a whole rigmarole. I have to jump through hoops to convert it, and so on and so forth. I can't read every kind of file. So please only do these kind of files on Blackboard. And also do not type your papers and drafts directly into the content field in the assignment page on Blackboard. I can't annotate them when you do it that way. So you're doing yourself, if you type it into the content field on Blackboard, your papers, you're doing yourself a disservice because I can't give you in-text annotations and feedback. That being said, your discussion board posts, unlike the papers and drafts, you should use the content field provided in Blackboard. So don't do attachments with the discussion board posts. They're different. It's a different thing. And I won't be I'll never make any sort of like in-text annotations on the discussion board posts. You are allowed one late submission of any part of your research paper except the final draft. I will accept no late submissions of the final draft. I've given myself the absolute minimum time that I can possibly grade everybody's paper in. So if you turn in a late draft of the final paper, I won't have time to grade it, and it's as simple as that. So like the annotated bibliography, the first draft, the second draft, any one of those submissions you can turn in late, but not the final. And you can turn in any one of those submissions up to a week late with a 5% penalty to the score for each day that it is late. So a week late, 35% reduction, but you'll still get points. And if you turn in a late draft, you won't have more revision time. So if you turn in your first draft late, it doesn't mean that you have an extended due date on the second draft. You'll have less revision time. So again, you'll be doing yourself a disservice if you turn in anything late. Try not to ever turn in anything late. This is just meant to be a safety net for extenuating circumstances. I'll accept asynchronous work up to a week late, but for half credit. And I won't accept anything more than a week late. And if you do it habitually, it'll also dramatically reduce your overall participation grade. So you'd be taking a hit on you'd be getting half credit on the discussion boards. And then it would also inform your overall participation grade and overall evaluation. Each part of this class builds on what precedes it, so always stay up to date to solidly fortify each lesson. Each thing builds on the last thing. We build on ideas. We try to put the texts in conversation with each other and see how the texts relate to one another. And also everything, of course, with the research paper happens in stages. And it's this kind of ascension. So if you start missing out on things, then it's hard to build a roof if you haven't built the walls. Let's put it that way. To be metaphorical. So the grading breakdown: the research paper is 70% of your overall grade. It's cumulative. So each of the components is a block of points building up to the full cohesive 70%. The final draft is 20%. So I basically do a pool of 1,000 points. So the final draft is 200 points. The topic proposal is 100. Annotated bibliography is 100, so on and so forth. Outlines 50 points. The quizzes are altogether 50 points, 5% of your overall grade. So again, it's not something to stress out about. The quizzes, they're meant to be easy. They're meant to be kind of a gimme. As long as you do the readings, they're meant to be a gimme. Discussion board posts are worth 13%, so 130% of your overall grade. So again, you don't want to miss any of those. 13% is 10 points per post, 13 posts, okay? And then your participation, attendance, miscellaneous assignments, and overall performance is worth 12%, 120 points. So as I said, with the group work, that sort of thing, that informs the evaluation of your overall performance. Some of these miscellaneous assignments, like I said, I can see who's watching the video lectures and stuff like that. And obviously I can see who's attending and participating. So make sure that you're attending, that you're participating, that you're fully engaged with all of the necessary parts. And also be aware that I can refer back to, I record every synchronous session. Sometimes I'll refer back to them, and I can see who's participating in different ways. So just always be up on that. C minus, as in English, and a C minus is the lowest possible passing grade for the course. The English department policy states that a student with a final grade below a C- receive an NC and no credit. If you get that, you can take the course. You can take the course up to 3 times. An F grade will be given if you miss too much class, if you just don't do the work. But the difference between an NC and an F is that an NC means that you put forth the effort, but as this is a foundational class for the rest of your collegiate experience, it means that I couldn't in good conscience put you forward and say that you're ready to go into the next level of college. But it doesn't affect your GPA. It means you have to take the class again, but it doesn't hurt your GPA. It just means that you might need a little bit more practice on certain things, a little bit more work. Whereas an F will drastically affect your GPA. But either way, you can take the class up to 3 times. But an F is punitive, where an NC is not punitive. And NC is a kind of a constructive evaluation. If you have any religious beliefs that affect your attendance, by all means, let me know. I'm perfectly understanding of that. I think Brooklyn College factors in, most major religions into their schedule. But if this does affect you, by all means, let me know, and you won't be punished. I would never punish anybody for something like that. Plagiarism, simply put, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not tolerated, and I will not tolerate it. It's not tolerated by the college. It's not tolerated by me. If you are caught handing in work that you have plagiarized from any source, and please know that it is easy to spot plagiarism. That's not a joke. It is, especially even easier in the online environment. You will fail the assignment in question, possibly the entire course, and you may be subject to disciplinary action by the college. You will be reported. I will report you to the college, as is my duty. I'm expected to do so if I catch plagiarism, and you can read that here. Should something happen to a loved one, to a family member, God forbid, then of course, let me know, and we'll work around that, whatever needs to be done. But I hope that doesn't come up. I hope that doesn't come up. But if it does, then follow this link, and we'll cross that bridge if we come to it. But hopefully that doesn't happen. Office hours, again, I welcome you to visit me during my virtual office hours. I'll always just be there after a class on Monday. And if you don't come visit me there, I'll just be twiddling my thumbs, maybe doing the Times crossword puzzle, just waiting for somebody to beep in. So please come, and we can talk about whatever you want. We can talk about your work. We can talk about the readings. If there's certain themes or ideas or concepts in the readings that you want to explore farther, I would love to just talk about it more and dissect those things a bit more with you. If you want to talk about your written work, your research paper, if when we get to the point where I'm putting feedback and comments on your paper, and there's something you want clarification on, by all means, please talk. We'll have a few laughs and have some constructive conversation. Should anything happen with Blackboard or anything like that, if you get blocked out from something, you can contact the IT help desk. The Writing Center might be extremely beneficial to a number of you. Really, I recommend everyone that goes to it. It just gives you another pair of eyes looking at your paper, looking at what you're working on, just further feedback, which can be really helpful. And you can get in contact with the Learning Center here. There's different kinds of tutors. They have writing tutors. They have people that can do look at your work and give you some feedback about your writing. If you have any disabilities, please let me know. And if you need any special accommodations, The sooner the better that you let me know if this pertains to you. And if you're not registered with the Center for Student Disabilities, and you should be, then you can contact them here, and you can get registered, and they can make sure that you have the paperwork for appropriate accommodations. This is just if you have questions about immigration status or DACA. This is a helpful. This might be a helpful resource for some help and advice about that sort of thing. And then we come down to our class schedule. I'll try to keep up on putting the schedule in the announcements. And of course, the weekly folders will contain all this and break this down. But you should really check the schedule frequently. At least once a week, you should look at the syllabus schedule and see what's coming up. See what readings that you have to do coming up. See what parts of the research paper that you have to do. So you can see, like, the first thing you have to do for the research paper is the topic proposal, which is due on March 1st. But this can also give you an idea of the readings that you have to do and when to get started on them. So, like, on February 17th, you have this reading, Carmilla. It's not particularly difficult, but it's a little bit of a longer read than some things. Julia Kristeva's, which is due on February 10th, is it's not a long read, but it's really difficult. It's just a heads up there. That's the most difficult reading you'll be doing the whole semester, probably in all of your classes, not just this class, I would wager. And then these ones are a bit tougher, but these aren't long. They're just complex and dense. This is a longer one, the Metamorphosis. This one's longer. The 10 o'clock people is pretty long, but not difficult. Blood Child's on the longer side. The Island of Dr. Moreau, those 3 parts are on the longer side. Not particularly difficult again, but on the longer side. And then Mrs. Caliban, we're reading it in 2 parts. It's a slim volume, but we're only doing it in 2 parts. So those are also on the longer side. All right, so please let me know if there's anything I left out, if you have any questions, or if you need any clarification about anything that I talked about here. Please email me any questions. If you haven't emailed me the information I request from you from your preferred email address, please do that ASAP. The sooner the better. I really need to know. Communication is so important. There's no way for me to gauge your level of engagement if you're not communicating, if you're not present in class, if you're not participating. And the first step to doing that is to really, like, just go down the checklist for this week, for this first week, and to do everything on there. But first and foremost is to email me from your preferred email address so that I know that you are receiving my communiques. All right, I will see you all next Monday, February 8th. And until then, be well, stay warm, stay cozy. And do good work.